And welcome to the Daily Space Weather. It is a filament fest going on the closest star. Maybe you can see them in these wavelengths. They're specifically chosen to highlight solar filaments. You can see a lot of dark regions there that aren't coronal holes. That's a bunch of solar coronal plasma being suspended by magnetic fields and defying gravity. We're defying censorship and fraud. At the Smash News Network, least busted name in news. Thanks for tuning in. Congratulations on realizing the channel exists, and pardon all the dark matter that is all over my face. So again, huge filament fest going on. There are at least 7 filaments that could get names. We've been naming them after living people. And you may be able to see some here. Don't worry if they're not obvious to you. We're going to show them in even closer detail than this, as we bring you the most comprehensive space weather and detailed imagery of the sun you'll find in the known universe. So check out this filament. This structure right here, you can see it's anchored down in various spots here. And it's actually looking pretty stable here. No real movement for that filament, just kind of hanging out there. And by the way, if you want to name filaments after living people, make sure you join us over on Twitter. Follow the hashtag #NameThatFilament. You can also find a link to the Hemp Lucid free mushroom gummies giveaway over there. We've also got a huge crown prominence up here, sometimes referred to as the solar polar vortex. And yeah, that's just another filament there. When they're hanging off the limb of the sun, we call that a prominence. It is the same feature. It's a lot of plasma. Here is the western equatorial region, and there is some high likelihood of a possibility of large flares coming from these areas down here. In the next 24 to 36 hours, the likelihood of those producing flares will drop down to just about 0. You also may see some awesome plasma reorientation happening near the center of the solar disk. First, the northwestern limb, a string of sunspots there stretching across the southern hemisphere, evidenced by those dark regions there. This is 304 plus 193 angstroms. These are all 24-hour videos, by the way. Doing daily space weather gives us a luxury of showing 24-hour spans. So here's a massive plasma reorientation happening right here, followed by the opening of a coronal hole. That's actually a plasma filament splashing back down there, really. Fantastic imagery from the Solar Dynamics Observatory. Here is the southeastern limb. Huge coronal hole visible down there in the lower left, as well as a filament just to its northeast. This huge filament right here. And last but not least, we've got the northeastern limb. And let's take a look at sunspots briefly before we show them a little more in depth. There is yesterday plus today SDO intensitygram. And we've seen a bit of a drop in the sunspot number and the radio flux in the past 24 hours. There's the SDO colorized magnetogram yesterday plus today. So far, we've got some interesting earthquakes to talk about and also some great volcanic imagery. We'll get to it. First, today's featured product is the Croissant Earth Society. Yeah, we make products that are designed to make everybody angry on the internet. And let us know in the comments if you think that the latest design should be herp derp. Yeah, herp derp. It's another term that needs to be defined. And let me use it in a sentence. Herp derp, the galaxy is very dangerous. Herp derp, the galactic core controls the sun. Herp derp, contrails are geoengineering. What else? Herp derp, everything's electric. Herp derp, everything's connected. Herp derp, I've never taken physics, but I want to argue with you about physics on the internet. Herp derp, it could be a noun or just an exclamation. It's what somebody says before they say things on the internet without having any idea what they're talking about. Croissant Earth Society, today's featured product. Links below the video to our Redbubble shop, as well as on the homepage at smashomash.com. You can also find a link to our Hemp Lucid shop. Huge sale going on. Save 40% at the 420 sale. Shop via our link or just head to hemplucid.com. Don't forget to enter the promo code SMASHOMASH on checkout to save some dough and perhaps get some free gifts. The official subscription services site of the Smash News Network, least busted name in news, is the Smash Team site at smashomash.com/smashteam. So if you want to help out the channel, we are still on Patreon. You can support us that way. But the most additional content will come from a gold or silver membership over at the Smash Team site at smashomash.com/smashteam, smashomash.com/smashteam. Launched back in October 2021. The best value is the annual paid-up subscription. These videos brought to you in part by our Smash Team members, especially the gold, silver, and gold annual paid-up subscribers. Links on the homepage to that, smashomash.com. And welcome to the Renaissance. We launched that back in 2019 in response to the ridiculous, pathetic, putrid, disgusting, and indeed evil and indeed deadly censorship by Facebook. So big tech organizations, perhaps the evilest corporations in the history of known human civilization. We've created our own web ring in order to help have an answer to that. So here's Luatolo, some great time-lapse photography there showing the Luatolo volcano located in the Lesser Sunda Islands there south of the Kamchatka Peninsula. Let's see what else is erupting. Luatolo's been producing looks like some new real estate up there as we see some explosive strombolian eruptions and some glowing lava there on the slopes. Semeru also exploding, flight level 140, 14,000-foot ash plume over Semeru, located on East Java, Indonesia. So interestingly enough, the volcanic activity on Kamchatka has dropped off the list. However, there is some interesting stuff going on under Kamchatka, which we'll get to here in a moment. Popocatépetl also exploding, flight level 210, 21,000-foot ash plume over central Mexico. It's a flight level 210. Flight level 140 over Guatemala from Fuego as it explodes. Sangre exploding in Ecuador. Flight level 190. Revenador exploding in Ecuador. Flight level 150. It's a 15,000-foot ash plume. And weak emissions from Sabancaya are a reminder that if you're going on a volcanic vacation, to leave your vault pole at home. Please don't pole vault volcanic calderae, as we need the views on YouTube. Next, looking at global seismicity, and there are a couple interesting quakes to note here. One of which was a 6.6 magnitude. So current seismicity level kind of high. Keep in mind that any earthquake can be a foreshock, and let's hope that this one wasn't a foreshock, although it's could be magmatic activity happening there below the Kamchatka Peninsula. So this is an interesting quake indeed. It was a 5.6 at 98 kilometers depth. And if that is magmatic activity at that depth, that is serious magmatic activity, producing a 5.6 magnitude quake there under the Kamchatka Peninsula, right near the shore, actually. So keep in mind that would have been a bigger quake if it was at the surface. The other one to note, the largest quake of the past 24, was this 6.6 south of Fiji. And that was at extreme depth. 562.5 kilometers estimated depth for that one. If that occurred at the surface, that would be a nearly 8 magnitude earthquake. And let's check out the rest of the past 24 hours here on the USGS site. So Kermadec Islands there had a 5.0. That was at 11:42 Universal Time yesterday. And then there was a 5.2. So there's a prime example of a foreshock. The 5.0 preceding the 5.2 magnitude quake. Papua New Guinea also had a 5.0. That was at 1912 Universal Time. 1912 Universal Time yesterday evening. And then about 40 minutes later, a 5.0 at the Kermadec Islands region. So quite a bit of shaking there north and east of Australia. 5.0 at Papua New Guinea. Again, just keep in mind, folks, any earthquake can be a foreshock. Then we had the 5.6 at Kamchatka. That was at 2:40 Universal Time this morning. And then just under 2 hours later, a 6.6 at the Fiji Islands. Again, quick reminder, folks, any earthquake can be a foreshock. So if you're in an earthquake-prone zone, have an idea which buildings may collapse, have a bug-out bag, know what will happen if the power will go out, etc. Thanks for leaving comments, Mike Bordages and Tinman 1057. Good morning to both of you gentlemen as well. Next, getting back to space, here's the past 24 hours in ionized helium, a classic Solar Dynamics Observatory wavelength. And one of our new favorites is a composite featuring 171 angstroms with the 211 angstroms. Two different species of ionized iron there. And again, we've seen a slight reduction in solar activity in the past 24 hours. The 10.7 centimeter radio flux has dropped down to 167 solar flux units. So it was all the way up at 178, breaking through some support levels and perhaps forming some new support levels now. The 10.7 centimeter radio flux, some would argue that it's the most important feature of a solar cycle. Some would say it's the second most important feature after sunspots. I think it's somewhere up there, but the magnetic field reversal process is more important. I believe that is the underlying process. And if you want to read all about what causes the solar cycles, become a gold member at the Smash Team site. We're in the process of composing a publication to explain a plausible mechanism underlying these solar sunspot and solar polar field reversal cycles. This graph shows a 1-year chart of the 10.7 centimeter radio flux. The smoothed 30-day Wolf number, that's the pink line. The radio flux is the red line. The radio flux is the black line. The red line is the sunspot number, and the blue line is the Potsdam AP, which is just an average of the KP index, global geomagnetism, earthly geomagnetism. So continuing on to our space weather enthusiast dashboard, NOAA not forecasting anything to happen here tomorrow. We are expecting to see a CME impact sometime around here. So sometime after 12 noon tomorrow, expecting a minor CME impact. It could cause a KP 5 or 6. Mild geomagnetic storm conditions could ensue from that. It's not expected to last long, maybe 6 to 12 hours. So it should be a rather rapid peak there, and then a rapid ramp down if we do indeed see an impact as forecast. Continuing on, here's Earth's magnetic moment from space for the past 4 hours. This imagery depicts magnetohydrodynamic pressure. I think we may have actually seen a minor CME impact yesterday also. We'll get to it here in a moment. Once again, this is the past 4 hours of Earth's magnetic moment from space. Our Geospace Magnetosphere movie. And we'll let that play through since it's refreshed. By the way, we don't edit these videos, and that helps us to get them onto your screen as promptly as we possibly can. Because editing takes a long time. Anyway, mainly encoding the videos. Here's Earth's magnetic moment from the ground for the past 4 hours. Looks like we saw a little uptick there in the magnetohydrodynamic pressure at the end of the Geospace Magnetosphere movie. Let's see if we see an uptick in ground magnetic perturbations also. This map shows nanotesla magnetic flux density at the surface. Should be a little uptick right there. It was slight. KP index currently only at 0.66. KP 0.66 is the planetary K index, an average of global geomagnetism. We'll also show the real-time solar wind measured outside Earth's magnetosphere here at Lagrangian point 1, the gravitational equilibrium point orbited by the ACE and Discover spacecraft, which are currently providing some data here. It looks like a CME impact, as we see a minor uptick in the solar wind speed and density, also the plasma temperature, all going up at once. A minor shift in the phi angle, and almost no shift at all there in the magnetic fields, which is the top pane. Current conditions are about 481 kilometers per second for the solar wind speed, solar wind density just under 6 protons per cubic centimeter. Also, this area right here looks like a CME impact. See a little uptick here in the density and the speed. Could be a sputtering coronal hole wind stream there also making its way through. But it's only a minor signal there, nothing to write home about. Continuing on to more magnetic data, there are your GOES magnetometers. In a rather normal operating range here, a little bit higher highs and, a little bit higher lows and lower highs. In other words, a tighter range there for the GOES magnetometer in the past 24 hours. And let's take a look at the heliospheric current sheet next. I suspect there is a sunspot about to rise in the northeast. It's going to be a small one, but I suspect one will rise here in the next 24 to 36 hours. So that's our top view ecliptic plane field plot. Earth is in a south pole current sheet, depicted here in red. There's the latest image. Keep in mind the magnetic environment can change rapidly with basically no warning. Next, our line of sight field plot. Let me just pause here for a moment for station identification. Congratulations on realizing that the Smash News Network least busted name in news exists. We saw a niche in the realm of space weather, so rather than complain about how there's no comprehensive daily space weather that's coherent in any way, we decided to take it on ourselves. Of course, we realized it would be quite a bit of work. Let's take a look at coronal holes. And we're not even at solar maximum yet, so it'll be even more work when we are at solar maximum. So please support the channel. Press like, subscribe, share, etc. Leave a comment. Even if it's derogatory, we take that as a compliment also, by the way. So there's our line of sight field plot, line of sight coronal hole plot rather, depicting the solar B field in blue, North Pole coronal holes in green, South Pole coronal holes in red. And as forecast a few days ago, we see these coronal holes of South Pole orientation in the east becoming more well defined. There's the current situation. Here's the past 24 hours. There's the current situation. Let me pause for a moment. Don't worry, folks. Even if I have no patience, I may behave like I do. Here's the past 24 hours in SDO 211 angstroms. And there is one place to watch for sure. This is a great wavelength to view this plasma reorientation right in this area. So I'll let that play through an extra time here for you. 211 angstroms is a great wavelength to view coronal holes. You can see that very well-defined coronal hole there in the southeast, as well as one kind of opening up and reclosing, looking like a little bit of plasma instability happening there in 211 angstroms. Next, we'll move to sunspots, which are a feature of the solar cycles, driven by the magnetic field environment of the photosphere. So keep in mind, folks, coronal holes happen in the solar atmosphere, 2 layers above where sunspots occur, and the layer separating the photosphere and the corona is called the chromosphere. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on in the chromosphere, for sure. Anyway, that's a sunspot situation. A minor dip in sunspot number expected today as we've got some setting sunspot groups there in the west. The likelihood of large solar flares mainly lies in sunspot 3282. Also, this string of sunspots in the southern hemisphere, there's a lot of magnetic field complexity there. And there is still a fleeting likelihood of large flares from 3280 over on the western limb. So here are some more 24-hour videos. There you go. There is your SDO continuum plus 171 angstroms. We'll zoom in to show some sunspot evolution. And we'll drop 171 angstroms to show just ombre. Some of those ombre are pretty bad ombres. I mean, this sunspot group right here is quite large indeed. Quite large indeed. And as you can see, there are at least 2 ombre there that are larger than the Earth. Those are some decent-sized sunspots. Next, let's move to energetic particles and solar flaring. No spikes in the proton flux, and really, considering how much magnetic complexity we've seen on the Earth-facing portion of the solar disk, the X-ray flux is underperforming. So we're seeing this drop back down with the setting of sunspots in the west. Again, there is certainly the magnetic field complexity available for large flares. Don't be surprised to see an M-class or even an X-class flare. Here's the past 24 hours and 94 angstroms, which, by the way, is a great wavelength to view flares. Along with 131 angstroms, it takes 10 images per minute instead of only 2 images per minute, a temporal resolution of 5 times higher than other great wavelengths like 171 or 304, etc. So the X-ray flux underperforming here a little bit. And let's take a moment to orient ourselves before we talk about coronal mass ejections, as there have been some more in the past 24. So this is what's going on over Lehigh Valley. That is where Smash Staff and I are located, Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, the United States. Or perhaps you prefer to refer to it as AUSA, the allegedly United States of America. If you are up before dawn, you may see Jupiter heralding sunrise. Jupiter rising just a little bit ahead of the sun there. Also a great crescent moon visible there, just southeast of the ecliptic. As we approach new moon on 420. This is where things are located now. We've got a crescent waning moon as we approach my favorite phase, new moon. So let's advance this 1 week. As where things will be in a week, we'll have a crescent waxing moon by the 25th of April. And here are some coronagraphs. So these are yesterday's coronagraphs, 102 frames from George Mason University. You can certainly see some CMEs happening there. And after some perfunctory analysis, we don't think those are earthly directed. We'll show some more frames from today also. There are an additional 25 frames from today. We don't think any of those are coronal mass ejections that are headed toward Earth either. But we are expecting an impact tomorrow, sometime after noon Universal Time. Anyway, we'll also show Stereo A and the Soho-Lasco C3. Stereo A located here just a few degrees behind the Earth orbitally speaking. It's, by the way, it's about to overtake Earth and start viewing space weather that is behind Earth. In other words, Stereo A is about to pass the Earth and become essentially a Stereo B. What we really need is a Stereo AX out at Lagrangian 0.5. Anyway, that's the situation there. Again, I don't think any of those CMEs are earthly directed. Here are some more 24-hour videos. The likelihood of Earth-directed CMEs is incredibly high because of all those filaments that we showed you earlier to kick off the video. Because keep in mind, folks, that you don't need to see sunspots or solar flares to see coronal mass ejections. Sometimes material goes flying without any of those features. Here's one more step in. And since 193 angstroms is showing that great plasma reorientation just east of the center portion of the solar disk, let's show that wavelength also. One of the many species of ionized iron, 193 angstroms. It's great at showing extended corona, active regions, coronal holes, and plasma filaments. Again, if you want to name filaments after living people, join us over on Twitter and follow the hashtag #NameThatFilament. It's pretty easy. If you don't have a Twitter account, create one. We cited no less than 7 filaments that could use names. So let's just briefly highlight them. 1, 2, 3, 4, Let me stop that. So there's the last frame. Let's get rid of those. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one here is not getting named. That one's already named the Bob Lehman filament. And then you've got 6 and 7. So at least 7 filaments could still use names. Follow the hashtag name that filament. Again, likelihood of coronal mass ejections in the earthly facing portion of the solar disk, very high. Here's the past 24 hours in 171 plus 335 angstroms, which shows great variation in the solar corona. 171 angstroms shows plasma orienting to magnetic fields there in the lower corona. 335 angstroms helps to create some contrast. That's the blue portion. The gold portion is the 171 angstroms. And let's take a look at the past about 2.5 hours from the great wide field of view, the GOES 16 SUVI. There's a reason why we stream it all day long on the Twitch channel, which, by the way, is twitch.tv/smashomash. And one more time, the most likely places to see large solar flares would be right over here, right here, and anywhere in that string. Those are all areas of likely large solar flares based on the magnetic complexity and filamentary situation in those regions. Bonus features are next.